After reviewing the missions, Luo Feng understood that these high-merit troublesome missions, aside from those involving primal chaos realm targets, are closely tied to the conflicts and resource competition between the Thunder Ancient Country and the Flame Wind Ancient Country. One example is the Snatch the Heavenly Yin Fruit mission. For each Heavenly Yin Fruit obtained, Emperor Chu's lineage is willing to pay 10,000 merit points. With no limit on quantity. The more fruits acquired, the higher the reward. Near the border region between the two ancient countries, there exists a Heavenly Yin fruit tree that is currently in its maturation period, expected to yield thousands of fruits in successive waves. However, the Thunder Ancient Country has already stationed a powerful formation there, guarded by a commander who has transcended the primal chaos realm, making direct acquisition extremely dangerous. The two great ancient countries occupy the most central and resource-rich regions of the land of origin. They monopolize rare natural treasures nurtured by heaven and earth, and constantly wage covert and direct conflicts to seize each other's resources. Some resources, like Heavenly Bend Stone Essence, are relatively low tier and are only occasionally stolen by particularly daring cultivators. However, high-valued treasures like Heavenly Yin Fruit are not easily touched even by godly kings. They are usually contested directly between the two ancient countries. These high-merit missions are categorized into three main types: bounty missions, garrison missions, and treasure-snatching missions. Bounty missions involve assassinating specific targets, but are extremely difficult because the target may reincarnate or leave behind hidden future threats. Garrison missions require long-term deployment and consume significant time and effort. Treasure-snatching missions are the most dangerous, as they involve direct confrontation over heavily defended resources. Luo Feng carefully evaluates these missions after transcending the primal chaos realm. He recognizes that although his strength allows him to dominate weaker cultivators, missions with high merit rewards will almost certainly involve opponents of equal or similar level, many of whom possess mysterious, unfathomable techniques. Compared to other transcended cultivators, he acknowledges his own limitations in strategy and subtle techniques, noting that he tends to rely on direct force, making him vulnerable to more complex opponents. Therefore, he concludes he still needs accumulation and experience before attempting more complex mission types. After consideration, Luo Feng determines that bounty missions are the most suitable for him at this stage. He further refines his selection criteria, choosing to avoid targets with extremely strong spiritual will, and focusing instead on those whose spiritual will is weaker, making them more susceptible to his methods. Among the bounty missions, he selects one with a clear objective: completely eliminate Great Saint Beiyu. Great Saint Beiyu is not an enemy of the Flame Wind Ancient Country, but he is placed on the bounty list due to his extreme behavior. He treats cultivators as food and deliberately cultivates them within his domain. He constructs numerous ordinary cities specifically for cultivators to live in, not for protection, but as breeding grounds for consumption. Periodically, he devours entire cities of cultivators, sometimes slowly savoring them, other times consuming large populations at once. When his territory is insufficient, he travels elsewhere to hunt and devour entire cities, provoking strong reactions from other domain rulers. As a result, although he avoids creating too many enemies by controlling his actions, he has still been placed on the Flame Wind Ancient Country's bounty list. Even though his true body has been killed multiple times, he continues to exist. Great Saint Beiyu is at the pinnacle of the primal chaos realm and cultivates the great Tao of life origin. This grants him extremely powerful life preservation abilities. Luo Feng recalls prior intelligence mentioning him, including accounts of him swallowing entire cities in a single bite. Luo Feng views such behavior as utterly unacceptable and becomes filled with killing intent. He studies the mission briefing and prepares to use his Lai Yuan technique, since purely relying on close combat would not guarantee a complete kill against such an opponent. He understands that killing a peak primal chaos realm existence completely is extremely difficult. Many such beings possess numerous resurrection methods, including rebirth through hidden vessels, reincarnation setups, or distributed life preservation mechanisms across their territory. Even overwhelming physical strength may not be enough if the enemy's true life source is hidden elsewhere in the land of origin. At the same time, Luo Feng analyzes his own capabilities. His close combat strength is extremely high, capable of annihilating enemies in a single strike under normal conditions. However, against opponents with complex survival mechanisms, physical destruction alone is insufficient. He therefore relies on the Lai Yuan technique, a supreme secret willpower technique unique to him. Since no one else understands its structure or characteristics, it is extremely difficult for opponents to anticipate or defend against it. He also considers that obtaining such a supreme secret technique is not unusual for a transcendent primal chaos realm cultivator, especially in a world where the ancestor has left behind many opportunities, many of which are controlled by the two ancient countries. Luo Feng concludes that the Lai Yuan technique is currently his most reliable method for fully eradicating such high-level targets, especially for ensuring total annihilation rather than partial destruction. Meanwhile, in the Tianji icefield, Great Saint Beiyu moves through the desolate wilderness toward a city. His massive beast-like form regards the city ahead as cultivated food. For him, devouring cultivators is not only a habit but also a part of his cultivation path, allowing him to comprehend the great Tao of life origin. Within the broader land of origin, practitioners of the life origin path vary widely. Some, like Luo Feng, value and protect weaker life forms, while others, such as Great Saint Beiyu or the ancestral god of the snow realm, treat countless beings as resources for cultivation. Although this path often lacks strong direct combat capability compared to others, it typically grants extremely powerful survivability. In the city below, ordinary cultivators live their lives unaware of impending disaster. A young girl has just broken through to the true god realm and excitedly informs her family. Her parents and siblings rejoice, proud of her achievement, seeing it as a path toward a better future in a harsh environment where resources are scarce and cultivation is difficult. Her father's efforts outside the city, risking his life to hunt beasts for resources, contributed significantly to her progress. However, at this moment, Great Saint Beiyu arrives above the city. He declares that enough offspring have been bred and it is time to feast. He opens his mouth, and a massive spectral head appears above the city, so enormous that it covers the entire sky. The entire city falls under a terrifying suction force. Panic erupts instantly. Cultivators scream in terror as they are lifted into the air, helpless against the overwhelming force. Some call out for help, while others desperately try to escape. Families are torn apart in midair, unable to hold on to one another as they are pulled toward the sky. The young girl, despite her recent breakthrough, is powerless to resist and is separated from her family. Great Saint Beiyu watches with satisfaction, indulging in his act of mass devouring as a form of enjoyment and cultivation. At this critical moment, Luo Feng appears silently from the void in black robes, his presence extremely small compared to the colossal entity above. Yet Great Saint Beiyu immediately recognizes him as a dangerous transcendent primal chaos realm figure from intelligence reports. Without hesitation, Luo Feng activates the Lai Yuan technique, and instantly Great Saint Beiyu's perception collapses as his entire world is replaced by an overwhelming willpower construct like a vast star formed entirely from concentrated spiritual force that crashes directly into his spiritual will. Despite standing at the pinnacle of the primal chaos realm and possessing extremely strong life preservation ability, his spiritual will is annihilated in an instant without any resistance. Even beings of comparable level would normally only be suppressed by godly king willpower rather than completely destroyed. Yet under the Lai Yuan technique his consciousness is entirely wiped out. His enormous body loses control and begins to fall from the sky. While the city, freed from the devouring force, releases its surviving inhabitants who drop back to the ground. Luo Feng then waves his hand and collects the corpse of Great Saint Beiyu. After the confrontation, Luo Feng confirms that as long as an opponent's spiritual will remains within the primal chaos realm category, it can be instantly killed by the Lai Yuan technique. However, he also recognizes that once stepping into godly king level will, a qualitative transformation occurs where this technique would at most suppress rather than annihilate. He reflects that truly eradicating a cultivator completely is extremely difficult, requiring either mastery of causality techniques powerful enough to sever all revival methods at their root or cultivation of the soul path that directly destroys the opponent's soul. Yet the soul path does not belong to any supreme Tao and must be self-developed through exploration, making it one of the most difficult and uncertain paths. After the battle, the surviving cultivators fall back into the city in confusion and terror. slowly reuniting with their families as they try to understand what has just occurred. While the young girl and her family also reunite amid the chaos. Luo Feng does not linger and departs with great Saint Beiyu's body, intending to use it as nourishment for Morosa, then continues toward the flame-wind ancient country. With the aid of the Lai Yuan technique, Luo Feng has completely killed great Saint Beiyu, and the Flame-Wind Association's Dark Hall confirms that all causal ties of great Saint Beiyu have entirely disappeared, immediately notifying all important guests of his death. Great Saint Beiyu has been completely killed? A top primal chaos realm powerhouse who also cultivated the great Tao of life origin. With extremely strong life-preserving ability. Who could have completely killed him? Could it be one of the top existences among the ancient godly kings of the land of origin? Those beings hold extremely high status and generally do not bully the weak. And great Saint Beiyu was cautious and never dared provoke them. What exactly happened? His death attracts the attention of many powerful individuals across the land of origin, causing alarm as they worry that such a terrifying existence might target them. Since most primal chaos realm cultivators do not possess life-preserving abilities as strong as his, some experts speculate that perhaps great Saint Beiyu chose immediate reincarnation after encountering an overwhelming enemy, which would be a normal response in such a situation. Meanwhile, Luo Feng's divine power incarnation in Chu capital also receives this intelligence from the Flame Wind Association's Dark Hall. And given his status, he has long subscribed to major intelligence updates within the land of origin. He finds it somewhat amusing that the report records only great Saint Beiyu's death without any information on how or by whom. As when he acted, only ordinary cultivators were present who could not even perceive his existence. And the only one who knew the truth was great Saint Beiyu himself, who was killed instantly by a single glance under the Lai Yuan technique without any chance to activate reincarnation, leaving no information behind. Using the tunneling transformation technique, Luo Feng traverses the void at extreme speed. Yet it still takes about 6 hours to return from the Tianji icefield to Chu capital of the Flame Wind ancient country. At the marquee mansion of Chu Yu, Emperor Chu Yu is surprised that after handing a batch of troublesome missions to Luo Feng and seeing him choose the one involving great Saint Beiyu, the target dies almost immediately after acceptance. He reflects that based on the battle at Thousand Star Tower, Luo Feng's physical body is extremely strong and capable of sweeping through peak primal chaos realm opponents. Yet no matter how strong the body is, it should not be enough to completely kill such an existence with numerous life-saving methods, leading him to conclude that Luo Feng's visible strength is only part of the truth and that he must possess hidden killing techniques, possibly even being the reincarnation of a godly king. At that moment Luo Feng arrives, and when greeted by Emperor Chu Yu, he calmly states that the mission is completed. Emperor Chu Yu expresses admiration, noting that Luo Feng must have been holding back previously when facing multiple opponents, while Luo Feng simply smiles without explanation, as even he was not entirely confident in killing several peak primal chaos realm experts simultaneously with the Lai Yuan technique, especially since some were imperial marquises whose deaths would bring fatal consequences. So he had deliberately remained low profile. When asked about proof, Emperor Chu Yu explains that since the mission had not been claimed for a long time, the timing of great Saint Beiyu's death already serves as partial proof. And if Luo Feng can present the corpse, weapon, or a recorded memory scene, it would be sufficient. Luo Feng then produces great Saint Beiyu's well-known double-edged axe, which Emperor Chu Yu recognizes as enough evidence and promises to submit the task and award merit points soon. Luo Feng reminds him to keep the matter confidential, and Emperor Chu Yu assures him that only the artifact spirit of the palace of Emperor Chu handles the process and that aside from the ancestor emperor no outsiders will know. Shortly afterward, Luo Feng receives a reward of 100,000 merit points. And with sufficient merit accumulated, he plans to exchange for the first volume of the Extermination of 72 Blades from the Great Tao of Destruction origin. He immediately heads to the palace of Emperor Chu. And inside the inheritance hall, the artifact spirit asks to confirm whether guest official Luo he truly wishes to exchange for the first volume of Extermination of 72 Blades. Yes, Luo Feng replied. The artifact spirit vanished, and inheritance energy flooded Luo Feng's mind as massive information poured in. He was shocked. Previously, he only understood basic information. But now, upon receiving the true inheritance, He realized its terrifying depth. The first calamity of the eight tribulations life form required mastery of 3 branches of the life origin Tao. While the first volume of Extermination of 72 Blades contained 2 branches of the destruction origin Tao, the heaven-splitting lineage and the dark heaven lineage. Yet it required 90.000 merit points, only slightly less than the 100.000 required for the life origin inheritance. The technique had almost no life-preserving aspect. Its essence was pure destruction. If you kill the enemy, there is no need to defend yourself. Luo Feng realized. The heaven-splitting blade contained 3 styles. Though seemingly ordinary, each strike could sever all things, even cutting through law operations and world barriers. A single strike could even tear open the world barrier, something even ancient godly kings might struggle to do. Luo Feng's own transformation techniques could not even shake that barrier. Meanwhile, the dark heaven blade focused on extreme compression of power, magnifying destructive force tens of thousands to millions of times beyond the primal chaos realm peak. Even a simple blade strike could cause the world barrier to tremble. Luo Feng realized this power far exceeded his own. The inheritance then revealed the fusion of both paths, combining absolute compression with absolute cutting power, forming a blade capable of destroying heaven and earth. Even Luo Feng's body would likely be annihilated under such a strike. This was only the first volume of the 72 blade techniques. The creator's intent was clear: transcend the cage, cut through all existence, and sever even the rules of the world itself. Luo Feng felt the terrifying obsession behind this path: pure destruction and absolute severance. Meanwhile, the Emperor of Chu observed Luo Feng. Could he truly have killed a top primal chaos realm being? Is he a reincarnated godly king? He thought. Regardless of origin, all beings of the origin world could be cultivated. He compared Luo Feng with Emperor Qing and reflected on his own disciples, considering whether Luo Feng should become his 3rd disciple, especially given his affinity with the destruction origin lineage. He concluded that although Luo Feng's chosen inheritances relied on self-cultivation rather than external resources, making the path extremely difficult, he should prepare to recruit him as a direct disciple. Inside Luo Feng's cave dwelling, Morosa and Moyu Qingyan were eating and drinking together while discussing cultivation matters. Morosa told Moyu Qingyan that Luo Feng had already transcended the primal chaos realm and that the resources he casually provided were beyond what even eternal true gods could obtain. He stressed that as a weak void true god disciple, Moyu Qingyan must seize this rare opportunity and not waste it. Moyu Qingyan acknowledged the gap in strength between himself and his master. Morosa then warned him about the daughters of prestigious families in Chu capital who had shown interest in him, urging him to remain clear-headed and avoid distractions. He argued that cultivators like Luo Feng, Yuan, and himself had no need for romantic attachments, as relationships could interfere with cultivation. Moyu Qingyan was initially surprised, as he knew many cultivators did form families, and he himself had been tempted by several noblewomen in Chu capital. After reflection, he decided to remain cautious and observe before making any decision, recalling examples of sincere, supportive relationships he had seen in the past. At this moment, Morosa exited and saw Luo Feng descending from the sky. Luo Feng called him to follow. Morosa suppressed his excitement and accompanied his master to the quiet room inside the Star Tower, a special cultivation space exclusively for him. Inside this space, Luo Feng revealed that during his recent journey he had killed a peak primal chaos realm expert who cultivated the great Tao of life origin and possessed an extraordinary physical body. With a wave of his hand, he brought out the corpse of great Saint Beiyu. Morosa immediately became excited upon sensing the powerful and ominous aura from the body. He recognized it as far superior to the incomplete primal chaos bloodline he had previously absorbed. He noted that such intact primal chaos realm corpses were extremely rare because even a remaining trace of consciousness could trigger complete disintegration of the body through resurrection methods. Morosa explained that although he could normally absorb energy from heaven and earth, his progress was slow and limited in quality. However, a complete primal chaos realm body would contain the opponent's Tao and laws, allowing his inner realm to evolve much faster. Luo Feng allowed him to cultivate freely before leaving the space. Morosa then activated a secret technique and began absorbing the corpse. The great Tao of life origin within the body was gradually refined into his inner world. accelerating the expansion and strengthening of his realm. As his realm grew, his comprehension of the great Tao of destruction origin also deepened, as he simultaneously analyzed all its branches in a comprehensive manner rather than focusing on a single path like most cultivators. Meanwhile, Luo Feng returned to his own cultivation space within the Star Tower and focused on studying the inheritance technique, extermination of 72 blades. Previously, his understanding of the great Tao of destruction origin was limited because the technique he used, world-breaking 9 blades, was created by a primal chaos realm cultivator who had not fully grasped even one branch of the Tao, leaving Luo Feng with fragmented understanding. However, after studying the first volume of Extermination of 72 Blades, and the related inheritance of the heaven-splitting lineage, he gained a much clearer understanding of the structure of the Tao. The creator of this technique explained the heaven-splitting lineage in a comprehensive and systematic manner, resolving many of Luo Feng's long-standing confusions. Over more than half an era of deep cultivation and repeated analysis, Luo Feng fully studied both the heaven-splitting lineage and the dark heaven lineage. This process brought about a profound transformation in his comprehension, as he could now clearly distinguish and understand both paths instead of seeing them as vague and conflicting concepts. With this breakthrough, Luo Feng began to integrate his insights into his combat technique, particularly the blade river slash. He simplified and refined it further, incorporating elementary principles from both lineages. This made the technique more efficient, less taxing on his spiritual will, and slightly more powerful. As his understanding deepened, he tested the limits of his control over galaxy blade lights formed in yin-yang particle form. The number steadily increased from tens of thousands until it reached 83,000 simultaneous blade lights before his mental burden became too heavy. He realized that this improvement meant his overall combat power had increased several times compared to before. He then speculated that if he reached the peak of the primal chaos realm in both the heaven-splitting and dark heaven lineages, his control and power would reach an even more unimaginable level. Luo Feng then turned his attention to the Star Tower itself. He tested his current full-force attack against its inner walls, using both blade techniques and the transformation method, which allowed him to erupt with tens of billions of units of power. Even with such overwhelming force, the Star Tower only slightly vibrated and easily dissipated all impact. This result shocked him, even with his current strength approaching the level of a first-realm godly king in raw power. The Star Tower showed almost no reaction. He concluded that if he were trapped inside, escape would likely be impossible, and even opponents far stronger than him might not be able to break out. He reasoned that although the Star Tower was supposedly a first-realm godly king's secret treasure, its defensive strength seemed far beyond that level. Normally, such treasures would require careful energy consumption and control to suppress enemies of the same tier. Yet this one appeared overwhelmingly stable. Luo Feng recalled his master mountain sitting guest, who had refined the Star Tower. According to him, the refinement process had experienced an unexpected accident in which a golden light merged into the artifact, accelerating its formation. At the time, Luo Feng had not questioned it deeply. Now, however, he realized the implications. A godly king-level refiner should have absolute control over the refining process, and an external force merging into the treasure suggested something beyond his master's control. This led Luo Feng to suspect that the Star Tower contained hidden mysteries far deeper than he had previously understood, and he began carefully sensing its structure for the first time. Doi de la ban asterisk de du. Da gop ton bo noi dung tanwan don dui nyat. Kong kan zong dong asterisk. While Luo Feng was focused on cultivation, a transcendent being from the primal chaos realm arrived in Chu capital, drawing the attention of the upper echelons of the city. At one of Marquis Chu Feng's other residences, a three-eyed handsome man immediately sensed the arrival and stood up. Marquis Chu Feng also rose at once. In the next instant, a figure appeared as if he had crossed space itself and arrived directly before them. The newcomer wore a simple dark robe that looked slightly tattered. At first glance it appeared ordinary, but upon closer inspection, it resembled a broken fragment of a dark world. His face was covered with blue scales, giving him an unattractive appearance. Yet his eyes were calm, gentle, and profound, as though they contained the laws and cycles of countless worlds. As he walked forward, the surrounding space subtly shifted, as if heaven and earth themselves were being influenced by his presence. Marquis Chu Feng immediately felt an immense pressure. He understood that although this person, Lord Yuan Shu of Yuan Shu Mansion, was only a transcendent of the primal chaos realm, his aura already approached that of a godly king. In this world, mastering even a branch of the origin grade Dao meant stepping into the realm of godly kings. While those who fully comprehended it could even create small universes and independently govern cosmic laws. Such existences naturally caused the surrounding cosmic order to respond to their presence. Marquis Chu Feng quickly stepped forward to greet him respectfully. The three-eyed man also introduced him with courtesy. Lord Yuan Shu responded calmly, acknowledging Chu Feng's status and even mentioning his advancement from a second-rank marquis to a first-rank marquis, praising his cultivation progress. After they were seated, attendants brought refreshments, and conversation gradually turned to the purpose of the visit. Marquis Chu Feng asked directly. Lord Yuan Shu explained that he had originally come to Chu capital to visit a godly king. But after hearing rumors of a primal chaos realm transcendent known as Great Saint Luo he became interested and changed his focus. Marquis Chu Feng then provided more details, explaining that Luo was extremely mysterious, rarely acted publicly, but had once fought 5 pinnacle primal chaos realm experts alone and swept through them effortlessly, revealing his terrifying strength. Hearing this, Lord Yuan Shu became even more interested. He expressed a desire to meet Great Saint Luo and hold a Dao discussion with him, and requested Marquis Chu Feng's help in arranging the meeting. Marquis Chu Feng immediately agreed without hesitation. To him, being asked for assistance by such a figure was not trouble, but opportunity. He felt that this was a chance to build goodwill with a transcendent of the primal chaos realm. Meanwhile, Luo Feng was still immersed in cultivation, occasionally stepping out to relax his mind. During one such moment, Morosa informed him that Marquis Chu Feng had visited while he was in closed-door cultivation. Since Luo Feng was not available, Chu Feng had left without disturbing him. Luo Feng was slightly surprised and asked about the reason for the visit. Morosa explained that Chu Feng had come on behalf of Lord Yuan Shu of Yuan Shu Mansion, who intended to host a banquet for Luo Feng and invite him to discuss the Dao. Upon hearing the name, Lord Yuan Shu, Luo Feng immediately understood the significance. In Emperor Chu's lineage, there were only 2 transcendent primal chaos realm experts. One was Marquis Darkfire, a direct disciple of Emperor Chu, and the other was Lord Yuan Shu, a disciple of the sovereign of Wanji Kingdom. Luo Feng also recalled the broader structure of the land of origin. There were 3 major first-class forces: Tianmu Kingdom, Wanji Kingdom, and the Eastern Extreme Territory. Tianmu Kingdom was known for its powerful sector beast, while Wanji Kingdom was backed by a sovereign whose personal strength elevated the entire faction to top-tier status. The Eastern Extreme Territory represented remnants of the original natives of the land of origin, who, despite their rough nature, still formed a major force. After considering the invitation, Luo Feng nodded and agreed to attend. A Dao discussion with a peer at the same level interested him, especially since many cultivators in the primal chaos realm relied on primal treasures or bloodlines, and such an exchange would allow him to compare paths and deepen his understanding. Not long after, Chu capital prepared an exceptionally grand banquet at the famous 13-star hall. This hall had once been established by Emperor Chu himself when the 13 emperors gathered in Chu capital, and it had since become a symbol of status. Hosting a banquet there required enormous resources and authority, and this time Marquis Chu Feng arranged everything in an especially lavish manner. The banquet quickly became the focus of the entire upper city. 6 first-rank nobles, 8 second-rank nobles, 9 guest elders, and numerous disciples of godly kings were invited. Even attendants and servants were aware that 2 transcendent beings of the primal chaos realm would be present, making this a rare event that might occur only once in countless years. Among the preparations, the culinary arrangements were especially extraordinary. The chefs invited were all renowned figures within Chu capital, each at the eternal true god level, and even one chef who had reached the primal chaos realm personally participated. The dishes they prepared were not ordinary food, but creations infused with the essence of heaven and earth, capable of affecting the soul and enhancing perception. In another part of the city, conversations were also taking place. Marquis Chula, a rather idle noble with limited influence, had gone to great lengths to secure a performance opportunity for a woman in light blue clothing. He explained to her that the banquet included 6 first-rank marquises and 2 primal chaos realm transcendents, and that even a slight impression on such figures could completely change her fate. He specifically emphasized that great Saint Luo He had shown interest in music in the past and even appreciated skilled performers. He advised her that if her performance could attract attention, her position in Chu capital could be fundamentally transformed. The woman expressed deep gratitude, aware that without his help she would not even have the chance to survive in such a place. Marquis Chula, however, was also realistic, as a weak noble with no real power in the primal chaos realm hierarchy. He understood his limitations. In Chu capital, even true powerhouses at the lower tier of the primal chaos realm were above him in status and influence. The banquet list itself reflected the hierarchy of the city. High-ranking nobles, guest elders, and disciples of godly kings filled the hall. But the true focus remained on the 2 central seats reserved for the primal chaos realm transcendents. When the day of the banquet arrived, Luo Feng appeared alongside Emperor Chu Yu. Their arrival immediately drew intense attention from all sides. Even powerful nobles, guest elders, and attendants turned their gaze toward the man in black robe, trying to observe the legendary Great Saint Luo He. Outside the main hall, Lord Yuan Shu personally stepped forward to greet him. Smiling, he addressed Luo Feng as Brother Luo He. Luo Feng responded in kind, both men treating each other with respect. At the moment of their meeting, both immediately assessed the other. Lord Yuan Shu sensed Luo Feng's physical body was extraordinarily dense, far exceeding normal expectations, almost like a condensed universe. Even without engaging in combat, he concluded that capturing or restraining such a body would be extremely difficult. Luo Feng, in turn, silently observed that Yuan Shu could influence the operation of cosmic laws around him. This level of control over the Tao exceeded his own current understanding, and he acknowledged inwardly that he was still inferior in terms of Tao realm comprehension. Despite this, neither showed hostility. Both were here for a Tao discussion, not conflict, and thus maintained politeness and mutual respect. Together, they entered the main hall. As they arrived, all nobles, guest elders, and disciples immediately stood in greeting before returning to their seats. Lord Chu Feng gave the order to begin the banquet. The event officially started, with layers of exquisite dishes, rare spirit fruits, and fine wines being served. The quality of the cuisine astonished even Luo Feng, as many dishes surpassed the standards of top-tier chefs he had encountered before. Some creations were so refined that they seemed to embody the essence of heaven and earth itself, directly influencing the soul and improving perception of cultivation laws. One of the most notable chefs present was Yu Zhoufang, a primal chaos realm-level culinary master. Even Lord Yuan Shu praised his skill after tasting the dishes, while Luo Feng also acknowledged the extraordinary level of craftsmanship. Beyond food, the banquet featured performances of music, dance, and illusion arts. All performers were at least eternal true god level, and their art could subtly affect emotions and perception. For weaker cultivators, even observing these performances could cause mental instability. But for the transcendents present, it became a controlled and enjoyable experience. Luo Feng observed the performances calmly, noting their refinement. He even considered that such emotional fluctuations could potentially assist his cultivation technique related to refining the heart and spirit through the 7 emotions, as long periods of cultivation tended to dull emotional sensitivity. Eventually, the final performance ended. The woman in light blue clothing concluded her act and quietly withdrew, aware that the true focus of the banquet had never been on the performers, but on the 2 transcendent beings seated at the center of Chu capital's most powerful gathering. All guests in the main hall of the banquet were high-ranking figures of Chu capital. As an example, Yu Zhoufang, though only a peak primal chaos realm practitioner, was extremely renowned for his culinary skill, and was often invited by godly kings. However, he usually declined even invitations from first-class marquises of the imperial clan. At this banquet, he attended because it was a Tao discussion between 2 transcendent primal chaos realm beings, and he maintained a humble attitude toward both godly kings and transcendent primal chaos realm figures. The highlight of the banquet began when Lord of Yuan Shu Mansion proposed a direct exchange of techniques with Luo Feng. Luo Feng agreed, stating he would respond with physical body techniques. The Lord of Yuan Shu Mansion used his Dark Mansion prison techniques, releasing dark flames capable of burning both body and soul. Luo Feng countered with the waters of the Black Abyss, formed from his Black Abyss transformation method. The black liquid, overwhelming in quantity, completely enveloped and suppressed the dark flames, demonstrating its ability to restrain even undying flames through sheer volume and control. Observers, including marquises, guest officials, and disciples of godly kings, were shocked, recognizing both techniques as extremely powerful and rarely seen at this level. The Dark Mansion flames were known to annihilate peak primal chaos realm experts. Yet Luo Feng's method neutralized them completely. The Lord of Yuan Shu Mansion then manifested a giant axe empowered by the Dark Mansion, while Luo Feng condensed 80.000 galaxy blade lights into a massive, blade river slash. Both sides unleashed their strongest frontal attacks. The collision revealed that the axe carried destructive forces of imprisonment and divine punishment, while Luo Feng's blade attack combined multiple high-level blade lineages. The clash resulted in Luo Feng's blade splitting the axe in half, while the blade formation also suffered partial fragmentation before reforming. The axe similarly regenerated, showing neither side was easily defeated. The exchange revealed that Luo Feng's blade formation, though powerful, had structural weaknesses due to its multi-unit composition. The Lord of Yuan Shu Mansion then attempted to use his Dark Mansion world to imprison Luo Feng's power avatar. Luo Feng responded by forming a silver avatar using 5 transformation methods totaling 1 billion units each. The Dark Mansion world failed to restrain it, as Luo Feng's spiritual will and body refinement strength resisted the domain's dragging force. The Lord of Yuan Shu Mansion escalated the technique by fully descending the Dark Mansion world into reality and binding the avatar with 8 colored prison chains forged from primordial materials. Although the chains suppressed and restricted the avatar, they could not destroy or fully restrain it. Even when the avatar expanded to full strength, it could not break free, but also could not be harmed. Luo Feng concluded that while his avatar, about 2 to 3/10 of his true strength, was insufficient to escape the chains, his true body might also struggle if trapped. The Lord of Yuan Shu Mansion acknowledged Luo Feng's extraordinary body refinement and confirmed he could not imprison or damage even Luo Feng's avatar. Both sides retracted their techniques and concluded the exchange peacefully. The Lord of Yuan Shu Mansion acknowledged the strength of body refinement transcendent primal chaos realm practitioners, and Luo Feng acknowledged the power of the Dark Mansion system. The banquet ended amicably, and news of the exchange quickly spread throughout Chu capital and the 13-star hall.